I had been looking forward to that night for weeks. My promotion had felt like the reward for years of late nights, skipped weekends, and quiet sacrifices no one saw. Emma had been the one who pushed me to take the job in the first place, telling me I was meant for more. Ryan had been the one who celebrated with me when I first got hired. They were my constants, my support system, my people. The restaurant was warm and loud, the kind of place where laughter bounced off the walls and clinking glasses blended with soft jazz from the corner. I had picked it because it was special, one of those expensive spots I couldn't afford to go to often, but tonight, I could. Tonight, I was going to treat the people who had been there for me. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors with a smile that wouldn't leave my face. I imagined Emma's bright eyes lighting up when she saw me. I imagined Ryan's grin as we shook hands like we always did. I imagined champagne, bad toasts, and the feeling of being surrounded by the people who mattered most. But what I saw instead froze me in place. They were sitting in the booth in the far corner, close, too close. Emma's hand was on Ryan's cheek, his arm wrapped around her waist. And then, as if the universe wanted to burn the image into my memory, she kissed him. It wasn't a quick kiss. It wasn't some drunken mistake. It was slow, familiar, like it wasn't the first time. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. I stood there with my hand still on the door, the laughter from the other tables sounding muffled, distant. My chest felt tight, like someone had shoved a fist inside and gripped my heart. Emma saw me first. Her eyes went wide, and she pulled back from Ryan as if she had been caught stealing. Ryan turned, his smile fading when he realized I had seen everything. "Ethan," Emma started, her voice shaking. I didn't say anything. My legs moved me forward, though I wasn't sure where I was going. The smell of garlic and butter made my stomach twist. I stopped at their table, looking at them both. "It's not what it looks like," Ryan said quickly, his tone almost pleading. "We were just." "Don't," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare lie to me right now." Emma reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Please, Ethan, it was." She stopped, biting her lip like she didn't know how to finish the sentence. "A mistake." I laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "How long?" Neither of them answered. That told me everything. People at nearby tables had started to notice. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the low hum of whispers. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal. I felt exposed, like I was standing under a spotlight while the two people I trusted most stabbed me in the back in front of an audience. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the wine glasses off the table. I wanted to ask them if the years of friendship, the nights of talking about dreams, the plans for the future, if all of it had been fake. But I didn't. Instead, I straightened up, my hands shaking so badly I had to shove them into my pockets. "You know what?" I said, my voice low but steady. "Enjoy your dinner." I turned before they could say another word. As I walked toward the door, I could feel Ryan's stare on my back. Emma called my name once, but I didn't stop. The air outside hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not to the apartment where Emma's perfume lingered in the air, not to the place where her laugh still echoed in the walls. I kept walking, the city lights blurring through the tears I refused to let fall. My chest hurt with every breath, and my mind spun in 1,000 directions. I thought that was the end of it. I thought losing them both in one night was the worst that could happen. But I didn't know then that they hadn't just taken my trust. They were about to take everything. I thought the worst part was over. I thought the night I saw Emma and Ryan together was the bottom of the pit. But I didn't know the pit had no bottom. A week later, I was at my desk, trying to lose myself in work, when I got the email, "Please report to HR immediately." I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was about paperwork for my promotion. Maybe it was a meeting about my new position. I walked into the HR office still half smiling. Linda Harper, my manager, was sitting across the table with two people from our I barely knew. Her face was as cold as the air in that room. "Ethan," Linda said, folding her hands on the table, "we've received serious complaints about your handling of company funds." At first, I laughed. It was so absurd it didn't feel real. There has to be a mistake. I've never. We have documented evidence, she cut in, sliding a folder toward me. Inside were printed emails I had never written, showing I approved transfers to fake accounts. I flipped through the pages, my pulse pounding in my ears. "These aren't mine. Someone, please don't make this harder," Linda said, her voice flat. "We've already informed the board. You'll be placed on immediate unpaid suspension while the matter is investigated." I stared at her, waiting for the smirk, the sign that this was some sick joke. But her eyes were dead serious. That's when it hit me. Ryan, he had friends in finance. He had access to my email from that time we worked late together and I let him use my desk. He had the connections to plant this. I left the building in a haze. My phone buzzed constantly. Emails from work, messages from people asking what happened. I didn't answer any of them. By the end of the week, I was officially fired for misconduct. My name was ruined in the industry. No one wanted to be associated with a man accused of stealing from his own company. I called Emma. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I called Ryan. Blocked. 2 days later, I went home to find a note from my landlord, Mr. Collins, taped to my door. You have 2 weeks to vacate the premises. Non-payment of rent. I knocked on his door, hoping to explain. Mr. Collins, I just lost my job, but all. Not my problem, he said, barely looking at me. I run a business, not a charity. 2 weeks. No extensions. I stood in the hallway holding the paper, the edges crumpling in my fist. 2 weeks. That was all the time I had before I was on the street. I spent that night calling people I thought would have my back. Friends from work, college buddies, neighbors I'd helped in the past. One by one, the excuses came. Busy. Can't get involved. Sorry you're going through this. By midnight, I had no job, no money, no place to live, and no one to call. I sat on the couch, staring at the eviction notice on the coffee table. My apartment was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. The walls felt closer than ever, like they were pressing in on me. Just a week ago, I had been celebrating a promotion. Now, I was counting the days until I lost everything. I didn't understand how Ryan and Emma could move on so easily while my life burned. I didn't understand why no one cared enough to believe me. But as I sat there, numb and silent, one thought kept circling in my mind. They didn't just push me into this hole. They buried me in it. And someday, I'd dig my way out. Jake's place was nothing like mine. It was small, 1 bedroom, with a couch that sagged in the middle and a kitchen that smelled faintly of oil and gasoline from his work clothes. Tools were scattered across the coffee table next to half-empty mugs of coffee. The carpet was worn thin, and the walls were yellowed from years of cigarette smoke. But it was a roof, and right now, that was more than I could manage on my own. I know it's not much, Jake said, scratching the back of his neck as he stepped aside to let me in. But you can crash here until you figure things out. I dropped my duffel bag onto the couch. It's fine. I'm not picky. He gave me a look that told me he knew I was lying, but he didn't push. Jake was good like that. He didn't ask for details unless you offered them. The first night, I lay on the couch listening to every creak in the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator. Each sound reminded me that I wasn't home anymore. I was a guest. Temporary, replaceable. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Emma's kiss with Ryan, the fake emails, the way Linda wouldn't even look at me when she handed me the termination papers. I thought about all the conversations I'd had with Ryan over the years, how he'd asked about my passwords, just in case, when we worked on projects, how he'd been oddly defensive when I brought up Emma in the past. The signs were there, I just didn't want to see them. Around 3 a.m., Jake shuffled out of his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. You're still awake? Yeah, I said, my voice low. Just thinking. He leaned against the doorway. You know you can't let them live in your head rent-free forever, right? I almost laughed. Right now, thinking about them is all I've got. He sighed and went back to bed. Days passed slowly. Jake left early for the garage, coming back with grease on his hands and exhaustion in his eyes. He tried to lighten the mood. Jokes, cheap beer, take-out dinners, but I could see the pity. I hated it. At night, I would lie on that couch and let my anger grow. It was easier than feeling sad. Anger kept me warm when the apartment's thin walls let the cold in. Anger kept me from feeling like a ghost drifting through someone else's life. I started making silent promises to myself. One day, Ryan would wish he had never crossed me. One day, Emma would regret every choice she made. They thought they had buried me for good. But I wasn't staying in the ground. The thought of revenge was the only thing that kept me breathing. It took me almost 3 months to find steady work. No company in my old field would even look at my resume. My name was poison. Every interview ended with the same polite smile and empty promise, we'll be in touch. In the end, I stopped chasing my old life. I took a job at a small tech repair shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn store. The pay was nothing compared to what I used to make, but George Turner, the owner, didn't ask questions about my past. He just handed me a toolkit and told me to get to work. George was a quiet man in his 60s with silver hair and a habit of staring at people for a moment longer than felt comfortable. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was worth listening to. This place might not look like much, he told me my first week, but you'd be surprised what walks through that door. I didn't understand what he meant, until the afternoon that changed everything. It was a slow Tuesday. I was bent over a laptop, replacing the keyboard, when 2 men came in. One of them was a tall guy in an expensive suit, the other a younger man carrying a tablet. I barely looked up until I heard the name. Yeah, Ryan Carter's got this new thing going, the man in the suit said. Big returns, no questions asked. But you didn't hear it from me. I froze, my screwdriver hovering over the keyboard. My ears sharpened like I was tuning into a frequency only I could hear. The younger guy chuckled. Sounds like he's playing with fire. Those deals don't stay clean forever. The tall man smirked. Doesn't have to. He just has to cash out before anyone notices. I kept my head down, pretending to focus on my work, but every word burned into me. Ryan, money, dirty deals. When they left, I couldn't sit still. My heart was pounding. For months, I'd been surviving, breathing, waiting. Now, For the first time, I saw something, an opening. That night, I stayed late, tinkering with devices that didn't need fixing just so I could think. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a direction. If Ryan was running shady deals, there would be a paper trail somewhere. 2 weeks later, my answer walked right through the front door. Her name was Maya Brooks. She came in carrying a cracked phone and a tired smile. She was in her late 20s, dressed in a sharp blazer, and she had the calm, careful voice of someone who dealt with numbers for a living. While I worked on her phone, we got to talking. She mentioned she worked in finance, private investments, high-risk portfolios. Something inside me clicked. Ever heard of a guy named Ryan Carter? I asked casually, like I was making small talk. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Yeah, why? I shrugged. Old friend. Just curious if his name's come up in your circles. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me for a moment, like she was deciding how much to say. He's ambitious. Let's leave it at that. I handed her the fixed phone and told her it was on the house. She smiled, thanked me, and left, but not before sliding her business card across the counter. I stared at it after she left, feeling something stir deep in my chest. It wasn't hope exactly, it was hunger. The more I learned, the more I could see a path forming in front of me. Not just to survive, not just to crawl out of the hole they'd buried me in. A path to take back everything they stole, and more. The next Saturday, I texted Maya. Greater than, coffee sometime this week. Could use some career advice. It sounded casual, harmless. Exactly what I needed it to sound like. We met at a small cafe tucked between an art supply store and a florist. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, and a quiet indie song hummed from the speakers. Maya was already there when I arrived, dressed in a fitted gray coat, her laptop open and a neat stack of papers beside her. She greeted me with a polite smile, the kind people give when they aren't sure what they've just agreed to. We ordered. I asked about her work, her projects, and her favorite travel spots, keeping everything light. I could feel her walls up, but walls have cracks if you know where to tap. After a while, I leaned back and sighed, as though it had just slipped out of me. Do you know anyone at Sterling Ventures? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Ryan's company. I nodded, pretending to fumble with my cup. Yeah, we used to be close, before he decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Now I hear he's doing really well, and I let my voice trail off, as though I didn't want to seem bitter. You're fishing, she said flatly, leaning forward. I didn't deny it. Look, Maya, Ryan didn't just walk away. He gutted me, took an idea I was building, cut me out of the deal, and used it to start that company. And Emma? I shook my head, letting the silence fill in the rest. They made sure I had nothing. Her gaze softened, but only slightly. That's a heavy claim. It's the truth. I reached into my bag and slid out an old prototype sketch, something I'd kept, not for legal proof, but for moments like this. This was mine. Look at Sterling's latest product release and tell me they didn't copy it line for line. Maya studied it, her eyes flicking between the page and whatever was in her memory. She closed the folder. If what you're saying is true, you're not just looking for justice. You're looking for revenge. I didn't smile, but inside, something darkly satisfying twisted in my chest. Call it what you want. I just want the truth out there. She hesitated for a long moment. Then her voice dropped low. I have access to documents. Internal ones, financial reports, acquisition notes, emails. Things that, if leaked, could cause him serious trouble. I kept my face calm, though my pulse quickened. Why would you help me? She shrugged. Ryan's burned more people than you realize. And I don't like arrogant men who think they're untouchable. For the first time, I let myself meet her gaze fully. Then maybe we're on the same side. We agreed to keep things quiet, no calls, no emails, just in-person exchanges. She would, accidentally, leave a USB in her bag for me to find, piece by piece. I left the cafe feeling the smallest flicker of power return to me. That night, while scrolling through social media, Jake sent me a link. You'll love this, he wrote. It was Emma's Instagram, front and center. A photo of her hand, perfectly manicured, resting on the wheel of a sleek black car. A diamond bracelet caught the light, tagged with #spoiled and #perfectlife. Another photo. Ryan and Emma in some rooftop restaurant, champagne glasses raised, the city skyline glittering behind them. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the images. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't even screenshot. I just memorized every ring, every purse, every smug little caption. They thought they were untouchable, that they could parade their happiness while the wreckage they left behind sat in silence. But silence was never permanent, not when you knew how to dig deep enough to reach the foundation and crack it from beneath. I closed my phone, sat back in my chair, and breathed. Patience. That was the only rule now. Maya didn't waste time. 2 days after our coffee meeting, she called me to come by her apartment. Her voice was low, urgent. When I arrived, she closed the door behind me and locked it. You're not going to believe what I found, she whispered. She walked to her kitchen table and dropped a thick folder in front of me. Inside were printed emails, bank statements, and contracts. Some were highlighted in red. Ryan's company isn't just bending rules, she said. They're laundering money, large amounts, moving through fake accounts. I stared at the papers. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. Hard, undeniable proof. My first instinct was to run to the police, to end it right there. But my anger wasn't satisfied. If I acted too soon, Ryan and Emma might find a way to twist it, to make me look like the bitter, jealous ex. No, I would wait. I would use this proof at the right moment, when it would destroy everything they had built. Maya leaned back in her chair, watching me. You're not going to turn this in, are you? Not yet, I said. If I go to the police now, they'll bury it. Ryan has connections. I want to make sure when it hits, it's so big he can't bury anything. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Just be careful. He's not the type to go down quietly. Later that night, I got a call from Jake. He sounded uneasy. Emma's been asking about you, he said. I froze. What do you mean asking? She called me, twice. Wanted to know if I've seen you. Said she was worried about you. I laughed bitterly. Worried? That's rich. Jake hesitated. She's been posting a lot online. Pictures with Ryan, dinner at expensive restaurants, jewelry, big diamond bracelets, necklaces. She keeps calling it her perfect life. I didn't need to see the posts to know exactly what she was doing, showing off, claiming victory, making sure the world saw me as the one who lost. I thanked Jake for telling me, then sat alone in the dark for a long time. Every image he described burned in my mind. But instead of losing control, I took a deep breath and reminded myself, patience. Revenge isn't about striking fast. It's about striking when they think they're safe. Over the next few days, I started planting seeds. Kevin Hayes, an old friend of mine and a casual acquaintance of Ryan's, became my first pawn, without even knowing it. Over coffee, I let small concerns slip into our conversation. I mentioned that I'd heard whispers about Ryan's investors being nervous, that some of his deals didn't add up. Kevin's eyes widened slightly. He didn't ask for details, but I could see the thought taking root. And Kevin was the kind of person who couldn't keep something like that to himself. Within a week, I started hearing back from other sources. The investors were talking. The rumors were spreading, quietly, but fast. Ryan's perfect image was starting to crack, like glass under too much pressure. For the first time in months, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt control. I was no longer the person they could step on and forget. I was the shadow in the corner, the whisper in the crowd, the one who decided when and how the story would end. And I wasn't finished, not even close. The first cracks were whispers. By now, they'd grown into shouts echoing through the sleek, glass halls of Ryan's empire. I didn't need to see it in person to know it was happening. Kevin Hayes made sure of that. Our mutual friend had a habit of oversharing, blissfully unaware he was my walking newsfeed. Every phone call with him was another nail in Ryan's coffin. Crazy stuff, man, Kevin had said last night. 2 investors dropped just this week. They're blaming the market, but, I dunno. Something smells off. I smiled into the receiver. Weird, indeed. The rumors I'd planted weeks ago had sprouted into thick, choking vines, wrapping around Ryan's reputation until his investors could no longer pretend they didn't notice. And now, the proof I'd been holding, Maya's damning documents, the paper trail of laundering, was burning a hole in my hard drive. I could have gone to the police right away. Part of me wanted to. But the other part, the one that had been humiliated, broken, and left in the dark, wanted Ryan to feel it first. I wanted him to taste the slow dread of watching everything he'd built start to crumble before it all came crashing down. By Thursday, I decided it was time. I sent the files from an anonymous email to half a dozen journalists I knew would salivate over the story. Numbers, names, dates, everything spelled out clearly enough for even a lazy editor to understand. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Headline: Tech darling Ryan Carter accused of multi-million-dollar fraud. Headline: Police investigate CEO over alleged money laundering scheme. Headline: Investors cut ties with Carter Innovations amid scandal. The photos were delicious. Ryan's signature smirk replaced with a tight, furious glare as he pushed past reporters. Flashes lit up his face, highlighting every crease of stress that hadn't been there before. By noon, Detective Harris entered the picture. I only knew his name because one of the articles mentioned him. He was described as sharp, relentless, and notoriously effective at financial crime cases. Perfect. I imagined Harris walking into Ryan's pristine office, tearing through his papers while the staff tried to pretend they weren't terrified. I imagined Ryan sweating through his custom-tailored suit, barking orders into a phone that no one on the other end wanted to answer. Emma's world was crumbling with his. Her Instagram, usually a constant stream of lavish dinners, weekend trips, and mirror selfies in overpriced dresses, had gone silent for 3 days. A digital blackout. People were already whispering in the comments of her old posts, what happened? Is she okay? Did they break up? Late that afternoon, I saw the photo. Emma, stepping out of Ryan's apartment building, hair messy, face pale, sunglasses failing to hide her blotchy eyes. 2 massive suitcases rolled behind her. The paparazzi captions didn't hold back. the queen leaves her castle. I stared at the image longer than I expected to. No pity, no ache in my chest, only the steady hum of satisfaction. This was what they deserved. Both of them. Still, as I sat alone in my apartment that night, watching the news loops replay Ryan's downfall from every angle, I caught myself wondering, when it's over, when he's stripped bare and she's nothing without the shine of his money, will I feel anything other than this hollow victory? Will revenge fill the cracks they left in me, or will I just be left with silence where the rage used to be? For now, I didn't care. Tomorrow, I knew, would be worse for them than today. And that was enough. It had been a month since the headlines tore Ryan's empire apart. The story had burned bright and fast. Fraud, embezzlement, offshore accounts, all splashed across every major outlet. The man who once held lavish parties for investors was now a cautionary tale whispered about in business circles. Emma's social media had vanished like it had never existed. No more champagne flutes, no more beach vacations. Just silence. I thought I'd erased them from my day-to-day life. I stopped checking for updates, stopped imagining what they were doing. I'd gotten so used to not seeing their faces that I almost forgot they were real people. Until today, the grocery store was quiet for a Saturday morning. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the aisles, and the faint scent of coffee drifted from the bakery section. I was reaching for a box of tea when I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. Emma stood by the produce section, staring at a pile of bruised apples like she didn't know what to do with them. She was thinner than I remembered, almost fragile. Her hair, once meticulously styled, was pulled into a loose, uneven bun. Dark circles pooled beneath her eyes, and there was a hollowness to her that I had never seen before. She noticed me instantly. I could see the recognition hit her, shoulders tensing, eyes widening, but instead of turning away, she walked toward me. Slowly, cautiously, like she wasn't sure if I would vanish before she reached me. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, almost breaking. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, taking in the changes. This wasn't the girl who had smiled at me over candlelit dinners or whispered lies into my ear. This was someone stripped bare, all the gloss burned away. I've been wanting to find you," she began. "To explain, to tell you I'm sorry." I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and unmoving. "It wasn't all what you think," she continued, her words spilling out faster now, as if afraid I'd walk away. "Ryan, he promised me things. He made me believe I mattered. But when everything fell apart, she stopped, swallowing hard. He ruined me too." Her eyes glistened, but there was no anger in them, just exhaustion. I could almost believe she was telling the truth, that maybe she had been just another pawn in Ryan's game. Almost, but I had spent months crawling out of the pit she helped throw me into. And in that time, I'd learned something. You can't excuse betrayal just because someone else betrayed you afterward. I let her speak. I let her try to stitch together a narrative that would make her seem like the victim. But when she finally paused, waiting for me to give her something, anything, I only shook my head. "We bury ourselves with the choices we make," I said quietly. Her lips trembled. I could see the sting of those words in her eyes, the way they cut deeper than she expected. For a second, I thought she might try again, might reach for my arm and beg me to hear more. But instead, she nodded, a small, defeated motion, like she knew this was the end of the conversation. I stepped past her, the cartwheels squeaking faintly against the floor. I didn't look back. As I walked toward the checkout, I felt something I hadn't expected, lightness. Not joy, not triumph, but a strange clarity, as if I had finally set down a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. I didn't forgive her. I didn't want to, but I also didn't need her pain to feel whole anymore. She could live with her choices, and I would live with mine. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like freedom. The first morning after the trial ended, I woke up to silence. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned. No more headlines about Ryan. No more whispers about Emma. The world had moved on, and so had I, or at least, I was learning to. Ryan was behind bars, serving a sentence that would strip years from his life. The footage, the bank statements, the testimonies, it all came together like a puzzle I'd been assembling in the dark. The moment the gavel came down, I didn't feel the rush I expected. No surge of victory, just a quiet confirmation that it was over. Emma was gone, not just from my city, but from every corner of my life. Her social media stayed dead, her phone number disconnected. I didn't need to know where she went. She'd chosen her road, and I'd chosen mine. Now, I had to figure out what came next. George was the first to bring it up. "You ever think about starting something of your own?" he asked one afternoon while we were fixing up a client's busted generator. I laughed. "You mean, instead of working for other people who think they own me?" "Exactly," he said, leaning back with that knowing grin. "You've got the skill, the grit, and now, you've got the time. Why not build something that's yours?" The idea settled in my mind like a seed. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake it. Every rusted pipe I fixed, every shorted circuit I rewired, I thought about how I could do this on my own terms. No bosses cutting corners, no partners stabbing me in the back. Just honest work, done right. By the end of the month, George and I were standing in front of a small, worn-down garage I'd rented on the edge of town. The paint was peeling, the floor cracked, but when I looked at it, I didn't see flaws, I saw freedom. We scraped together some savings, bought a set of good tools, and slapped my name on the sign, Hail Repairs. Maya stopped by the shop on our second day open. She walked in holding 2 coffees and that same half-smile she'd worn the night we met. Looks good in here, she said, glancing around. It's a start, I told her, taking the cup. Not much yet, but it's mine. That's the important part, she said softly. It's yours. We started seeing each other more. Not in a whirlwind romance kind of way, more like 2 people who had been through storms and now preferred walking slowly, watching the skies. She never asked for details about Emma, and I never asked about the people who hurt her. We both knew the past had its place, and it wasn't between us. Running the shop was harder than I imagined. There were slow days where no one came in, weeks where bills outpaced earnings. But there was also the first customer who told me she'd recommend me to everyone she knew. The first big job I completed without a single callback. The first time I locked up at night and felt proud instead of drained. One evening, George and I were closing when he said, "You know, I think you're finally yourself again." I looked at him, the weight of the last year pressing at the edge of my mind. Maybe, or maybe I'm someone new. Either way, he said, you're standing on your own feet. That's what matters. Sometimes, I still thought about Emma. Not in the way I used to, not with that mix of love and rage, but in a distant, almost impersonal way. She was a chapter in a book I'd already closed. The same went for Ryan. If revenge had been a mountain, I'd climbed it. At the top, I realized there was no treasure, just a clearer view of the path ahead. And that was enough. The pain was still there, tucked somewhere deep, like a scar that only aches when the weather changes. But it didn't control me anymore. It didn't decide what I did, who I trusted, or how I lived. One morning, I stood outside the shop just as the sun rose. The light spilled across the street, turning the old garage's windows gold. I took a breath, feeling the cool air in my lungs, and thought, this is mine. Not the pain, not the past, not the revenge, my life, my terms. The prison loomed in the distance, its gray walls rising like the ribs of some dead giant. The cold wind cut through my coat as I stood across the street, hands buried in my pockets. Visiting hours had begun 20 minutes ago. I could have walked inside, signed my name, and faced him through a pane of scratched glass. But I didn't. Instead, I watched the gates. Somewhere behind them, Ryan sat in a cell, counting days the way a drowning man counts breaths. Each tick of the clock for him was another reminder that the world kept turning without him. For me, the days felt different. Lighter. Not because revenge had healed me, it hadn't. The scars were still there, hidden under skin and memory. But I'd taken the shovel from his hands and stopped letting him bury me. I thought about what I'd say if I walked in. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a smile. Maybe the same words I'd told Emma. We bury ourselves with the choices we make. The wind picked up, carrying the faint metallic clank of the prison gate closing again. It was a sound that belonged to him now, not to me. I turned away, pulling my coat tighter. The road stretched out ahead, empty, open, mine. His days would be about waiting. Mine would be about living. And that, I realized, was the last shovel of dirt I'd ever need.